The sublime images, the poetry alone, is that which is present to our minds in the reading. So, to see Lear acted, to see an old man tottering about the stage with a walking-stick, turned out of doors by his daughters in a rainy night, has nothing in it but what is painful and disgusting. We want to take him into shelter and relieve him. That is all the feeling which the acting of Lear ever produced in me. But the Lear of Shakespeare cannot be acted. The contemptible machinery by which they mimic the storm which he goes out in is not more inadequate to represent the horrors of the real elements than any actor can be to represent Lear. They might more easily propose to personate the Satan of Milton upon a stage, or one of Michelangelo's cerebral figures. The greatness of Lear is not in corporeal dimensions, but in intellectual. The explosions of his passion are terrible as a volcano. They are storms turning up and disclosing to the bottom that sea, his mind, with all its vast riches. It is his mind which is laid bare. This case of flesh and blood seems too insignificant to be thought on, even as he himself neglected. On the stage we see nothing but corporal infirmities and weakness, the impotence of rage. While we read it, we see not Lear, but we are Lear. We are in his mind. We are sustained by grandeur which baffles the malice of daughters and storms. In the aberrations of his reason we discover a mighty irregular power of reasoning, methodized from the ordinary purposes of life, but exerting its powers, as the wind blows where it listeth, at will upon the corruptions and abuses of mankind. What have looks or tones to do with that sublime identification of his age with that of the heavens themselves, when in his reproaches to them for conniving at the injustice of his children, he reminds them that they themselves are old? What gesture shall we appropriate to this? What has the voice or the eye to do with such things? But the play is beyond all art, as the tamperings with it show. It is too hard and stony. It must have love scenes and a happy ending. It is not enough that Cordelia is a daughter, she must shine as a lover too. Thetis put his hook in the nostrils of this Leviathan, for Garrick and his followers, the showmen of the scene, to draw the mighty beast about more easily. A happy ending! As if the living martyrdom that Lear had gone through, the flaying of his feelings alive, did not make a fair dismissal from the stage of life the only decorous thing for him. If he is to live and be happy after, if he could sustain this world's burden after, why all this putter and preparation? Why torment us with all this unnecessary sympathy? As if the childish pleasure of getting his gilt robes and sceptre again could tempt him to act over again his misused station. As if at his years and with his experience anything was left but to die. Lear is essentially impossible to be represented on a stage. But how many dramatic personages are there in Shakespeare, which, though more tractable and feasible, if I may so speak, than Lear, yet from some circumstance, some adjunct to their character, are improper to be shown to our bodily eye? Othello, for instance. Nothing can be more soothing, or more flattering to the nobler parts of our natures, than to read of a young Venetian lady of highest extraction, through the force of love and from a sense of merit in him whom she loved, laying aside every consideration of kindred and country and colour and wedding with coal-black Moor, for such he is represented in the imperfect state of knowledge respecting foreign countries in those days compared with our own, or in compliance with popular notions, though the Moors are now well enough known to be by many shades less unworthy of a white woman's fancy. It is the perfect triumph of virtue over accidents, of the imagination over the senses. She sees Othello's colour in his mind, but upon the stage, when the imagination is no longer the ruling faculty, but we are left to our poor unassisted senses, I appeal to every one that has seen Othello played, whether he did not, on the contrary, sink Othello's mind in his colour, whether he did not find something extremely revolting in the courtship and wedded caresses of Othello and Desdemona, and whether the actual sight of the thing did not overweigh all that beautiful compromise which we make in reading. and the reason it should do so is obvious, because there is just so much reality presented to our senses as to give a perception of disagreement, with not enough of belief in the internal motives, all that which is unseen, to overpower and reconcile the first and obvious prejudices. Note of author. The error of supposing that because Othello's colour does not offend us in the reading, it should also not offend us in the seeing, is just such a fallacy as supposing that an Adam and Eve in a picture shall affect us just as they do in the poem. But in the poem we for a while have paradisiacal senses given us, which vanish when we see a man and his wife without clothes in the picture. The painters themselves feel this, as is apparent by the awkward shifts they have resource to make them look not quite naked, by a sort of prophetic anachronism antedating the invention of fig leaves. So in the reading of the play, we see with Desdemona's eyes; in the seeing of it, we are forced to look with our own. End of author's note. What we see upon a stage is body and bodily action. What you are conscious of in reading is almost exclusively the mind and its movements, and this I think may sufficiently account for the very different sort of delight with which the same play so often affects us in the reading and the seeing. It requires little reflection to perceive that if those characters in Shakespeare which are within the presence of nature have yet something in them which appeals too exclusively to the imagination to admit of their being made objects to the senses without suffering a change and a diminution, that still stronger the objection must lie against representing another line of characters which Shakespeare has introduced to give a wildness and supernatural elevation to his senses, as if to remove them still farther from that assimilation to common life in which their excellence is vulgarly supposed to consist. When we read the incantations of those terrible beings, the witches in Macbeth, though some of the ingredients of their hellish composition savour of the grotesque, yet is the effect upon us other than the most serious and appalling that can be imagined. Do we not feel spellbound as Macbeth was? Can any mirth accompany a sense of their presence? We might as well laugh under a consciousness of the principle of evil himself being truly and really present with us. But attempt to bring these beings onto a stage, and you turn them instantly into so many old women that men and children are to laugh at. Contrary to the old saying, that seeing is believing, the sight actually destroys the faith, and the mirth in which we indulge at their expense, when we see these creatures upon a stage, seems to be a sort of indemnification which we make to ourselves for the terror which they put us in when reading made them an object of belief, when we surrendered up our reason to the poet, as children to their nurses and their elders, and we laugh at our fears, as children who thought they saw something in the dark triumph when the bringing in of a candle discovers the vanity of their fears. For this exposure of supernatural agents upon a stage is truly bringing in a candle to expose their own delusiveness. It is the solitary taper and the book that generate a faith in these terrors. A ghost by chandelier light, and in good company, deceives no spectators. A ghost that can be measured by the eye and in its human dimension, and a well-dressed audience, shall arm the most nervous child against any apprehension, as the sight of a well-lighted house and a well-dressed audience shall arm the most nervous child against any apprehensions, as Tom Brown says of the impenetrable skin of Achilles, with his impenetrable armour over it. Bully Dawson would afford the devil with such advantages. Much has been said, and deservedly, in reprobation of the vile mixture which Dryden has thrown into the Tempest. Doubtless, without some such vicious alloy, the impure ears of that age would never have set out to hear so much innocence of love as is contained in the sweet courtship of Ferdinand and Miranda. But is Tempest of Shakespeare at all a subject for stage representation? It is one thing to read of an enchanter and to believe the wondrous tale while we are reading it, but to have a conjurer brought up before us in his conjuring gown, with his spirits about him, which none but himself and some hundred of favoured spectators before the curtain are supposed to see, involves such a quantity of the hateful incredible, that all our reverence for the author cannot hinder us from perceiving such gross attempts upon the senses.